Welcome back, students. CJA 213. I'm your instructor, Jason Jones. And now for the material you've been waiting for, how to detect a lie. So, the liar's success depends on knowing and anticipating the need to lie and when to lie, using the lie of omission versus fabrication. Now, omitting details or leaving things out is one way to lie, as we know, and another way is telling big whoppers, adding details to the story that weren't there in the first place. That's fabrication. So a person who lies has to be inventive. They have to be able to create things that did not exist and then place them in with events that did occur so that they seem to make sense. So you can see that there's this sort of paradox between being inventive versus having a good memory. And oftentimes a person has to be able to coordinate those two things. Typically they have to be able to lie often and be good at it, and be an adept actor, concealing emotions, and also it helps to have successfully lied to an interviewer before, because then that builds up confidence. Careers of the liar. So these are people that can lie well because of what they do for a living. Actors, concealing emotions when they might not really feel fear but showing fear. Poker players. Why poker players? They're obviously concealing their emotions. Professional auction participants. If you've ever seen someone bidding on a house or bidding for items against other people, it's the same thing with poker, not letting them know when you're running out of money or that when you're really wanting something versus not. Police officers and detectives, obviously, for interviews and interrogations, getting details and being able to conceal oftentimes the reason we're trying to get the information using pretext, as they're known. Lawyers are very good at it. They're often called liars. And of course politicians, who oftentimes are lawyers. So I know the detectives who interviewed Al Gore in San Francisco. I personally saw him deliver two speeches when he was running for office, and as the political winds shifted, often so did his rhetoric. I'm certainly not attacking Al Gore, because there are plenty of politicians on the right and the left, Democrat, Republican, and any other political party that are adept at this. In fact, I would love to get to know him, and he'd be a great guy just to sit around and learn from, as far as the inside tricks of Washington and politics. And I'm certainly not attacking politicians, but it is what it is, and we know that oftentimes to get elected and to get things done, they sometimes have to conceal and be deceptive. Gut feelings. These are behavioral clues or characteristics. I don't know if you've ever had a gut feeling about something, you couldn't really put it into words. Well, it's important that you sort of understand that gut feeling and try to tease out what it is that you saw or heard that led you to those conclusions, because oftentimes when we can tease those details out, we can get great information and ultimately ask additional questions that can help us crack a case when questioning someone. The investigator is unaware of the nuances of the specific behaviors, and the suspect is unaware he is providing the clues. So pay attention to those gut feelings, because you were seeing or hearing something, you were perceiving something that ultimately, if you can understand, will might enable you to ask additional questions so that you get what you need. This is also a good reason to have a second person in the room when conducting an interview, because they may be more attuned to these things while you're asking questions. They're less distracted with questions and figuring what questions to ask next. The 5 moods of a liar. The first is anger. And anger is used to oftentimes control and manipulate. You're externalizing, you're attacking. You're not dealing with your own. You're deflecting and redirecting. And of course, people that are angry, then as sometimes we feel as interviewers that we must calm them down, and that can take us and distract us from the issue at hand. Depression. This has been described as anger turned inward. It is internal. Anger spoken to oneself. It's pain. Might be suicidal comments or my life is ruined. Person may appear exhausted where they take a deep breath and they slump their shoulders. Denial. This is how people lie. You can deny with anger or without anger, but ultimately providing excuses, phony alibis, stories, omitting details, fabricating information. All of these moods, this is very similar to the cycle or the same emotions that people experience that are dying or going through the dying process, or finding out that they're dying. So think of the 5 moods of the liar as the same as those that found out that they have terminal cancer or something like that. Bargaining. It's a manipulation tactic. Forging a bond of manipulation. You're deflecting one's mood. You're shielding. And so some examples of this might talk about your health problems. That I'm just so sick. I can't deal with this. Or flirting, or talk about knowing someone that you know. Well, I know the chief of police. Boy, I've never heard that one before. Asserting values. I would never do this. I'm an honest person. I swear on the Bible. Or I wouldn't do this. I'm a Christian. Trying to verbally bond with you. Those are all examples of bargaining. And then, of course, there's acceptance, giving up. Accepting guilt, needing to confess, being submissive. This is ultimately where we want to get people so that we can get the information we need. Demeanor. Remember, extremes in behavior are indicative of deception. So if somebody is overly happy or overly angry, anything extreme that seems out of the norm, that is an indicator that they're being deceptive. Lying often causes changes in attitude in verbal, nonverbal behavior. So, if somebody's seemingly fake, they're trying to act like this isn't a big deal when it obviously is, whatever you're questioning them about, that is an indicator of deception. So consider how a normal or a reasonable person would respond. And obviously taking into account cultural factors, because different cultures, people respond differently. But if you're kind of aware of sort of how the norm in a bell curve would respond, anybody outside of that bell curve on the extremes, be aware that that could be an indicator of deception. How does a truthful person behave? Well, they're calm, relaxed, often cooperative while being interviewed, although they can be nervous, obviously, at some point, but usually that nervousness will subside. Truthful people are generally sincere in word and action. Their actions are congruent with their words. Their smiles look genuine. Overall, truthful people are cordial, friendly, and relatively easy to handle. Not always, though. You've got to realize there are some communities that either have had bad experiences with police or interviewers of any type, and so that's not always the case, but that's often the case with, say, the general average population. And again, recognize the difference between people that are dishonest and people who just dislike police or distrust police. Dishonest people typically are very impatient. Why? Because they want to get out of there. They want to be done with this. This is very stressful. They know they have something to hide, or they're not wanting to reveal something, and so it forces them to be very tense and defensive. Be aware that some try to seem outwardly unconcerned, but inside they are feeling panic. Dishonest people sometimes are overly friendly or polite or cooperative, and this is so that you will become like a friend rather than an enemy, and so that you look like you're being honest. But again, overly friendly. It's usually extreme. They're not able to measure out. They're trying to act what they think would be normal, but with a little bit of adrenaline, it doesn't seem genuine. Dishonest persons sometimes exhibit a defeated attitude. Maybe they feel they've already been detected and caught. They believe their guilt is known, and so be aware of that. They might take the offensive by portraying a surly, nasty, or aggressive attitude. Of course, this is an attempt to deflect and redirect, get you to back off and become defensive yourself, and really distract you from the issues at hand. So, innocent, truthful people will relax as the interview continues because they know they have nothing to hide, whereas guilty people will become many times more nervous as the interview continues. Anger. They may be angry because of the perception that they are being railroaded, or because of past negative experiences of some cultural issue, whereas guilty people will use this feigned anger to attempt to take the offensive and to get you to back off or distract you from the issues at hand. So, both tend to quietly wait and listen for the interviewer to lead them. Quiet is to the benefit of the guilty because they do not want to talk unless asked. Innocent might be a possible personality trait. They just might be naturally quiet, or they might be a little submissive naturally, respecting police authority and that sort of thing. So truthful people tend to have good posture, relaxed, although think about Generation Y and later, where people kind of tend to be more slouchy. So it's not always that way, but keep in mind that arms are away from the body, minimal body movements during the interview, of course, unless you have somebody that's a natural gesturer or gesticulator. Whereas sometimes untruthful behavior, real defensive posture. Maybe their arms are crossed, concealing their body, trying to conceal their abdomen. That's a natural mechanism to protect one's core. May position shoulders so that the trunk of the body is not exposed. You're not squared. You're kind of maybe one shoulder out in front of the other. Slouching and leaning back. So that way you're further away, your body and your head is further away from the interviewer. You're moved back away from the person. Sometimes people don't even realize they're doing this. Or big, gross body movements. Excessive perspiration, lots of sweating. Because why? They're nervous. Increased respiration due to muscle tension. They're tensing their muscles, sometimes to the point of even panting or seeming out of breath as they're talking. Or untruthful behavior. Hands, loss of fine motor skills, very moist and clammy. You have them pick up a pen or something like that, and then they're taking gross stabs at it. Maybe they're putting their hand over the body, over the mouth, concealing the eyes, drumming fingers like indicating impatience, clenching fists, opening hands and closing hands. These are all signs that a person's obviously very nervous and ultimately might be evading or concealing information or trying to deny, obviously, and they're very nervous. So be aware of these nonverbal behaviors. Scratching. Oftentimes, the blood is rerouted from the digestive tract to the skin, the surface of the skin, which opens up the pores ultimately, and so you'll see lots of scratching, very sensitive skin. An innocent person Arms across the body, what might this indicate? Well, the person might be cold, or it might indicate that they're using it as a barrier. Eyes. Truthful people generally have good eye contact, but be aware that eye contact in some cultures is not acceptable, so this isn't always the case. So, you've heard that eyes are the windows of the soul. Well, most liars know poor eye contact is an indicator of deception, so they may try to force eye contact with you, and they may appear bug-eyed, and of course that's a fight or flight response, and they may fail to look at you when you ask a stressful question, or may look at you excessively, but that will feel fake, and you'll notice that it's extreme and excessive. It is the eyes that determine whether or not we are progressing with the interview. Watch the eyes. Smiles. Is it natural or forced? You'll notice that sometimes people create little jobs by picking their teeth, chewing their fingers, and biting their nails. They might have dryness of the mouth. You notice by their like kind of a tacky stringiness in their mouth, and they're kind of maybe wanting something to drink, or there's like kind of a clicking sound in their mouth as they're trying to deal with the dryness of their mouth. Verbal. So always begin an interview by establishing a baseline so that you know what's normal for them, culturally and otherwise. So you're not going to get right to the heart of the matter. You're going to talk about other things that you know they'd be honest about, and try to break down those barriers and establish a bond. And during that time, you're going to observe their speech, tone of voice, loudness, and speed of delivery, so that you can read not only their tone of voice, but also look at their body language, so that when you do talk about sensitive issues, you can see if that body language or tone of voice changes. So, truthful people tend to respond directly to questions with a timely response because they're being truthful. They don't have to delay to consider and think through the lie. Truthful people are not afraid to say words like killed, stole, raped, fraud, and other terms which attaches the connotation of punishment, because it doesn't apply to them. It applies to someone else. Somebody else did those things. But untruthful people tend to be vague. They stammer, long pauses between answers, or they answer too quick, too short, too long, too elaborate. Guilty people tend to talk softly or mumble. In many cases, they talk through their hand. Consider what is normal for the individual and for the population. Establish that baseline in advance. So truthful people tend to lodge complaints later in the interview, while deceitful people do so toward the beginning, alleging a violation of rights or inconvenience of the interview. Why are they doing this? Obviously, they're doing it to distract and deflect and redirect, and so that you're not focusing on them. You're having to defend your own actions. Untruthful people might provide an unsolicited, premature explanation. Did you steal the car? An innocent person would say, no, I didn't. Guilty person answers and adds reasons why they could or would not be involved, and tries to discount any evidence he is aware of in advance to prove innocence. Guilty people, you can ask my mom, my probation officer, my priest. They would tell you I wouldn't do something like this. Well, obviously that can't be proven that I wouldn't do. It's a character question versus what does somebody actually know. Untruthful people focus on irrelevant points. An incident or a piece of the incident that can be verified. A suspect will try to tie it together. If this is true, I must be telling the truth about everything else. Excessive politeness or respect, excessive helpfulness. Notice I'm focusing on excessive. Look for that excessiveness, because that's an indicator of deception. As a general rule, a delay in response is a good indicator of guilt. Innocent people rarely think of a response. They simply answer the question. Delays for a truthful person. Wording the question they might not understand, delay between the incident and the interview, mental confusion, maybe impairment due to drugs, alcohol, or mental illness, maybe cultural or language barriers. This is why responses might be delayed. This is why you want a good baseline in advance so that you can determine what might be true and not. And they might be considering the type of question. It may be one that requires some thought. So, answering a complex question without thought is just as likely to be deceptive as a simple question with delay. So, extremes in behavior indicate deception. Suspects may use a series of deceptive physical and verbal ploys to cover the pause while they decide what to say. Creating a job, doing something, picking the teeth. Oh, hold on, maybe coughing for a second. Suspect repeats the interviewer's question, allows time to think, asking them to repeat the question. Honest people may use it to consider the question and the person's motivation for asking it. Responding with a question to move the conversation away from the direction that is potentially embarrassing or threatening. This is a verbal judo tactic, deflect and redirect, we call it. So, sometimes, in response to a question, they may say, "Are you saying I stole this?" What does that do? That puts you on the defensive. Hanging sentences. Suspect does not complete his answer and says something like, "You know, well," and this might be a point of deception. Non-responses. There are two forms. Interjecting a statement and directing the conversation away from something he didn't want to talk about. And the second way is shutting down, having a conversation with self internally. And then, of course, you have to ask the questions several times. Minor admissions. Admits wrongs not related to the crime or the incident to show them that you're being truthful. Well, I've sped before, but I certainly, wouldn't do this over here. Gallows laughter. Ha 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 ha. Inappropriate, excessive, or forced laughter over something that isn't that funny. Political answers. Suspect might respond without telling a complete or direct lie. To the best of my knowledge, I believe, if I recall correctly. Well, at this point in time, emphasis on truthfulness. Enhance truthfulness by showing past cooperation. Well, in the past, I've done this, or honest to God, honestly. Memory problems. I can't remember. Selectively good remembering. You'll know people that can remember certain details and certain dates, but oh boy, regarding this particular incident, they don't remember because it ultimately doesn't favor them. Memory problems. Truthful people, minor changes in story over time, whereas dishonest people, when they're manufacturing a story, you'll notice significant changes in the details. I don't understand. Well, might be a person with low intelligence or a child or something, but it can also be used to give the person more time to formulate an answer. I'd be happy to pay back the money. Okay, if that's what you want me to say, then I'll say it. Those sorts of statements, they're saying that as an admission of guilt because they don't want to actually say that they did it, but they're saying that if that's what I need to do, I'll just pay the money back. Well, you need to take it to the next level and get them to actually admit culpability. You're getting close if they say that. If you have any questions, email me. And again, make sure you read the material so that you get the full grasp of this. These are just highlighting points in the material to help focus your attention.